Hi, host Eric here. I'm talking with famous people, and I want to talk today a little bit about the problem of agency when we are discussing certain things. Agency is it it underlies every discussion we have about anything, because of course we are all agents. That is to say, we act. We act in ways that are not entirely predictable, and the reason our behaviors as individuals can't exactly be predicted is because of two reasons. One, there's there's a randomizing factor somewhere in the mix that could be potentially something like extroverted intuition that drives a person to seek novelty. It certainly is built into the human being a some desire for novelty in all people, and varying degrees for various people. The thing about that is, within each individual human being is whole fractal sets of frameworks and realities that operate according to their own rules, that get mixed in with the rules of other realities, that they get tied, are all tied and related back ultimately to the individual's own life arc and identity build over the course of time. So when we're talking about an agent, we are representing something, a massively deep ocean underneath the surface there, that we see as simply a person doing some things. Now, psychologists have attempted to isolate some of the ways in which we misunderstand the other by talking about things like attribution bias, where when a person does something, we assume it's because they meant it in certain ways. And it's an attribution of cause that's not justified. It could turn out to be right, or as right as such things can be, but that's not the point. The point is you're making arguments, right? I have a lot of people tell me, I don't like to debate, I don't like conflict, I don't want to argue or whatever, which is fine. But what what I want to keep insisting to people is that if there is a dispute between two people are in disagreement about something, there are only three options. One, it gets ignored because it's not that important, and it can get ignored. What's the fine solution? Two, it gets addressed. I'll come back to that. Or three, it gets someone someone brings coercion into the mix. So in the first case, no problem. The second case, it gets addressed. Then as soon as somebody starts addressing a problem, if they're not talking about it, if they're not two people talking about a third problem, it's one person talking to the second person about the second person being a problem, or having some sort of behavioral issue, or something like that, then the first person is making claims necessarily that the second person is rejecting. It is every individual's right and nature, and it is significant for each individual to reject those claims that he feels are malignant to his own reality. So at that point, then you've got a dispute that can be discussed. And if the individuals between two individuals, then those two individuals have a responsibility to communicate about that dispute in a way that applies the same burdens to themselves as to the other party. That's the core underlying rule. If you're going to say this is unfair because blah, then the analogous analogous or analogs to that, or comparable situations that go my way, you've got to apply it in my direction as well. If you're not actively finding examples for the other side, then you're not doing your job in assigning the burden in the first place. Because to say that one party has a burden to show something suggests that, or to do something, suggests that they're being unfair and not doing it. And fairness is going to be adjudicated on that issue of reciprocating burdens. There are some exceptions, but in general, that's a good rule to go by. So if it's not okay for me to stay out past 10 p.m. because you get jealous and whatever and make me stay home, why is it okay for you to stay out past 10 p.m.? Because I don't get jealous? And if that's the reason, then I should get you to compromise on something equivalently on the other side. It should be discussed at least. At least I have a claim, right? If her, and then this is talking about a relationship issue. It's not one that I've had particularly. I didn't have it with Candace certainly. No, I never had it actually. But it's one that I know some of Candace's friends have with their husbands, and um, you know, Candace would not talk to me about what burdens I ought to meet by evaluating first if she meets equivalent burdens on the other side. She'd evaluate if she met burdens on the other side, and she'd have a long list of them, but not factor in the equivalency. So, first of all, she's completing a lot of stuff that I'm not asking for and don't want. And then that's not going to, in my opinion, gain her any latitude when it comes to issues of fairness, particularly. If I say, yeah, but I gave you pimples and cancer and a wedgie and I shoved a banana in your face, so that's good stuff too. You go, no, that's shitty stuff. I don't want any of that stuff. Now, granted, Candace's stuff that she was giving me wasn't shitty stuff. It was like cleaning up, being attentive to things that I didn't really care about that much. And I acknowledged it and gave props for it plenty. But I didn't ask for it, and it didn't replace what I actually wanted from her, which was to be treated as an equal. So anyway, the point of this all is agency. Agency is easy to attribute in individual one-on-one disputes. It's much more difficult to attribute when we're talking about groups. And this is the core problem with protocols that attempt to supplant the wisdom of individuals and or the complexity of inter-individual relationships by dictating a centralized protocol that's going to use coercion to compel individuals to behave differently. When we take that latter approach there, we run into problems every single time. We necessarily run into problems every single time. Why? The protocol is inflexible and individuals are endlessly adaptable. The protocol only applies to some individuals, but it has to apply to everybody to be fair. So it chooses, I'm going to accept individual unfairness for group justice, so to speak. Except, number three, it assumes its own solvency. So when you have government programs that come into place and they say, oh, well, let's all, us voters, let's vote for a government that does X, and then it does X, well, what we've done is we've said, let's put protocols above people. Let's deny the reality that an individual situation can be adjudicated according to principles and determined to be fair or unfair according to principles much more easily than it can according to the existing approach to criminal justice. The reason is because of this diffusion of agency. When we assign a protocol to dictate to us what we must do, and we assign it in a way that is backed with force, we almost always run afoul of the following reality. One, the protocol won't do what it's supposed to do. Two, the protocol will do a lot of stuff it's not supposed to do. And three, no one will be held accountable. So that's good in terms of criminal cases against real criminals. So if somebody's on trial for murder and they actually committed that murder and they're found guilty, they diffuse that responsibility for that guilty verdict out amongst 12 people plus responsibility for the verdict punishment between the judge and other parties. So that's good because it preserves the integrity of it gives everybody else multiple lines of defense, as it should, because that guy violated rights. We have to respond to it in a group fashion. We can't respond to it as individuals. But the problem is, right now, when responding to it, we are responding to it through a myriad of different frameworks. Most of America is utilitarian. They are making their decisions based on what they predict will be the outcome of a policy which we know will do harms to individuals. In that context, they are committing an unethical advocacy because they are advocating for aggression, unjustified use of force. Now, we have a long-standing tradition of sort of leaving politics behind when politics is over, as though whether I'm a Republican or a Democrat or a Libertarian, I'm still just as good a person. I just have just a difference of opinion. I am here today to tell you that it is not a difference of opinion. It is one side is correct and the other side is incorrect. And one side is correct because in this protocol, it's simple. It doesn't need to be messed with. It can be applied every time. And it doesn't justify violence or use of force against people who have not trespassed upon the rights of another. Those who oppose this model will argue that on the margins, in certain extreme cases, this model can be abused by individuals to justify stuff that ought not be justified. I agree with that. I think that's unfortunate. But I think that's why it's a matter of framework. If as a society we were adjudicating things through the dual lenses of the fundamental equality and uniqueness of each individual human being, and two, the duty to not interfere in ways that are coercive, except in response to coercion. These two frameworks, we can operate through those frameworks, prioritize both sanctity of life and rights protection, and become comfortable with the fact that sometimes bad stuff is going to happen, stuff that's not pretty in the world. It's going to happen whether we throw money at it or not. It's going to happen whether we make it worse by adding additional coercion to it or not. We have to accept that. To the extent that society matures and begins to shed coercive protocols, we all benefit, and those bad things are less likely to happen. Will we ever be forever rid of all coercion? Probably not. But we can keep government down to its bare minimum size and shape, such that it can both protect the rights of citizens, enforce just laws, and be simple, clear, reasonable, and defendable. There is nothing defensible about the status quo legal justice system. It can't possibly be if they have such internal contradictions as they have. Thanks for watching, I'm going to people.